Okay, thank you everyone for joining myself and Amy Mason, who is the Director of Academic Center for Educational Success at Alderson Broaddus University. And really pleased for that Amy's joined us for this webinar. Like I mentioned before, I've also got my colleague Hannah Woodruff, who will be there to answer any questions you have. You can type those in the Q&A chat box option that you have there on this webinar. What we will do is we'll also take questions towards the end of the webinar that Amy and myself could address at that point. So please do engage in any questions you may have, and hopefully we'll try to answer all of them. Okay, so I'll get the webinar started now. What we're going to cover today is really just go over some introductions, tell you guys who Sonocent are if you weren't aware of us, and then it'll be over to Amy, who'll go through a few of her experiences with regards to Sonocent, how it worked. We were going to have a poll question in here, but I've actually removed that just conscious of the time prior to Amy's webinar. So I've taken the poll question out. So it'll be literally Amy's presentation, and at which point we'll also look at a quick demonstration of how Sonocent works. So hopefully you guys get to see this live. Towards the end of this, time permitting, we'll try to take some more questions from you guys and answer them live. Amy and myself will try to do that too. Okay, so just a little bit about us. This is our 10th year. Sonocent started about 10 years ago in the UK, and with the goal really being to help students who are struggling with note-taking to take notes not only independently but more efficiently. Since then, the software has evolved to such an extent that essentially become not only a replacement for digital recorders, but really the most recommended note-taking option in the UK. So pretty much almost every university to an extent uses Sonocent in the UK. What we've also done is that about 12 months ago, we entered the US landscape. And since then, when we started our pilot program, which allowed universities to test this out for free for a semester, we had over 300 universities that have actually now implemented Sonocent. So really pleased with this, something we're very passionate about. And at the end, what we want to do is give the power of the spoken language back to the student, actually. So Amy, I'm going to pass it over to you. So this is where Amy's going to talk about her experience with the with Sonocent, their pilot, and how it works. So Amy, I'm just going to mute myself and unmute you.
Okay, thank you very much. Can everyone hear me? Can everyone hear me? Just want to make sure. Super.
Yep.
When Sonocent approached me about perhaps doing this webinar, I wanted to take a little bit of time at the beginning of it and talk a little bit about the Alderson Broaddus University context. Back in the fall, we found out that Sonocent had an opportunity for a free pilot, and I can't speak for the rest of you, but our budgets are pretty tight, and we're always looking for things that we can do to help support our students, and an opportunity to try something free was just too good of an opportunity to pass up. I had learned about Sonocent a little bit at a national conference related to students with disabilities and disability accommodations, the HED conference a year ago, and had planned to try the program with some of those students. But when the free pilot came, I had an opportunity to expand my goal a little bit. Alderson Broaddus is a little bit of a unique institution. We all have, I think, at every institution, some things that define us and that shape or kind of color how we approach what we do with students. At Alderson Broaddus, context is key. I don't know how many of you are private or how many of you are public institutions, but ABU is a small, private, liberal arts focused institution. For private schools, the cost of the institution is always an issue, and we are operating at about $30,000 or just a little over per year for each of our students. We have a nice generous discount rate and some other financial aid opportunities that are available to them, but $30,000 is a pretty significant price ticket. We have had some really significant enrollment growth between 2011 and now, 6 years or so. We added a new strategic plan in 2011. In 2011, we had fewer than 500 students. We now sit between 1,100 and 1,150 per year. That's a lot of growth. It's growth very quickly. And it's presented some interesting issues in terms of managing larger number of students. And of course, the more students you have, the more needs there are that need to be addressed. We handle between 30 and 33% first generation college students that are at risk because they don't have those models in their family that help them understand what college is and how it works and kind of how to manage as they begin that college experience. And we provide some supports for them separately. About 94% of our student body uses all of the financial aid available to them. 94% of our student body essentially can be defined as financially insecure because this is a private institution and we've got a price tag and we've got this larger group of students that are financially insecure. We push really hard at that 4-year commitment. We want to move them out of college within 4 years if we have a way to do it. And we try very hard to position our students well to do that. We are very unique in that we are about 70% athletes in our student body. That's part of our strategic plan, and it's resulted in a student body that's almost double the number of athletes of any comparable institution we've been able to find. Athlete grad rates, you all know, are closer to 5 years, but we push to move them out in 4, and we're fairly successful doing that. But athletes come in at risk in some way. They have a lot to manage. They have a lot to juggle time-wise and physical energy-wise. And so we know we need some things in place to support them. We also know that we have about 60% of our student body entering with at least one academic deficiency. Maybe the need to remediate math skills or writing skills or reading skills. And so there's, you know, a group there that we know we need to serve. When you kind of put all those pieces together, it's a little bit of a unique context, or maybe a lot bit of a unique context, I suppose. I'm not, like I said, I'm not sure really all the different types of institutions we have with us. But we know that our greatest challenge is figuring out how to serve the needs of a student population that's entering with these kinds of potential risk factors. They aren't necessarily going to struggle. They don't automatically struggle, but there are enough categories of risk that we are looking for ways to meet that challenge and to do it intentionally if we can. Amir, can you go to the next slide, please? What we have done is to try to create an intentional foundation of support for students in any of those categories that might need assistance. If we put the foundation of support there first, we know that they have a better chance of success than if they are running from behind and trying to fix things later. So we've been very intentional about what we've created for our students. Knowing that we were embarking on a new strategic plan, as of fall 2012, we opened an academic center for educational success called ACES. It's essentially this idea of a one-stop shop for academic support. We have embedded multiple services, including services for students with disabilities, tutoring services, and a writing lab. The idea of academic coaching, that general learning skill development for students who may have come out of high school without all of the learning skills they need, or who may need to develop additional skills or enhance the skills they have to produce collegiate level academic work. And then a learning lab. Because we have so many NCAA athletes, we have a lot of required study hours for those individuals required by NCAA. We have a lot of programs that are doing some intentional remediation for students that are struggling, and they build in kind of as a support or a baseline for those remediated programs, study hours where they require the students to come and spend time where they can get help while they're here if they need it. It's also open for free study. The Learning Lab capitalizes on congregate learning. We look for ways to put students' minds together and let them support each other. And then we add our own service professional, peer tutors, for example, that are here and available to support those that are studying and learning here. So we did all of that as an initial baseline, and then we began to add some linked services. Knowing the different populations we're serving and the areas at which they might be at risk, we have added most undecided academic advising here as well, and then broadened that a year later to include support for faculty who were advising at-risk and probationary students, knowing that those are populations that need some special assistance when they're being advised. We made some adjustments to our first year experience course and began to intentionally build in the idea of learning skill development there, and trying with our incoming freshmen to set this tone for the future that everybody needs help developing skills. Everybody needs an opportunity for assistance, and when you need assistance, where do you go? You go to ACEs. And so we've pushed hard to build that as a baseline here so that any student struggling feels that it's commonplace and normal to seek assistance and to be here for whatever reason they might need assistance. And then the last thing we added, and this was 2 years into the strategic plan, was we added a 2-level probation program that it actually involves academic classes where we group our students on probation, but where we built it with 2 levels in case students become so at risk that they cannot fix their situation in 1 semester. We run about 80 students per year through those 1 or 2 levels of probation, and work intentionally to help them correct their situation. If not at the end of the first time on probation, certainly by the end of the second time. We do 60 to 64% correction after the first course, and then we add maybe another 20% correction by the end of the second course. And so if you're good at math and you're counting, we're losing maybe up to about 20% of students who become at risk and go through that probationary process. And I don't know about all of you, but I'm greedy. And I really, I want that last 20% of students. I want everybody who wants to be in college and wants to be successful to have an opportunity to correct their situation. So I am forever looking for ways to improve what we have to offer and the ways that we offer those services. What I have done, and I am primarily responsible for those 2 levels of probation, what I have done is try to meet the challenge of designing a program for the at-risk and probationary students that supports their learning needs. Part of doing that is figuring out what their actual learning needs might be. And that's kind of where Sonocent begins to come into my presentation. I've looked and done a lot of different kinds of activities and services that help us identify what the students need, try to help us help them learn in the way they need to learn, and responding to each of them learning in their own learning way. Trying to be strategic about it, trying to be intentional about it, and then ultimately trying to be cost effective. Again, our budget is not as large as we would like our budget to be, and we have to pick and choose the services that we provide to some degree based on what we can afford to do. We know that students who struggle have some things in common. We know that they tend to struggle with organization. We know that they struggle with time management and finding ways to juggle all their different responsibilities and the things they'd like to participate in. Anything that's not actually class-oriented. We also know that a lot of times students come to college and they don't really understand how learning happens. And so we look for ways to address organizational structure, to help manage their time, or to provide time-saving methods of learning, tips and tricks that help them get through material more quickly, that help them remember what they learn more quickly, and then hopefully over a period of time develop the skills they need so they can move on successfully on their own. We ultimately need to help them correct their situations as quickly and effectively as possible, but we also want the correction to be long-lasting. It doesn't help them to spend a semester or two in a probation class and kind of fix the situation, and then another semester or two down the road they're no longer successful and they have to start again, or worse, leave the institution. So I've been intentional. I've tried to pick and choose what works, and I think what works well. We work intentionally with leveraging learning styles for academic success. We try to work developmentally, but I'm also pretty invasive. So I'll say that. I get very interactive with students. I do some measure of individual work with most of the students in those classes, and get them to talk to me about what's going on so that I can sort of help them tailor what they're doing to their own needs. So what we do is pretty interactive. Our students, we know, need to learn how they learn. And you remember me saying earlier, we were about 70% athlete on campus, which is a huge percentage of students who have a body learning component to how they learn. We also have somewhere between 3 and 5% of our students are musicians. Those are also a lot of times body learners in some way. They learn best tactily. They learn best with that physical involvement. And the general population, the average population on a college campus is usually closer to 5 to 7% would be body learners. So I have this huge group where academically sitting in a class and trying to listen, sitting quietly and trying to study or read a textbook, it's not going to work very well with that group, or at least not as effectively as we need it to work. So I've spent a lot of time looking for things that help my body learners. Sonocent, when the pilot, I found the pilot and the pilot was available, I was thinking in terms of audio note taker. Here's a piece of software that we could use. It's colorful. It attracts students visually. Maybe this is something that we could try. And as I learned more about the program, honestly, the program itself, I know it's an audio note taker, but for me, and in terms of how I work with my students, and in particular, all those body learners, the Sonocent program actually combines auditory learning with tactile learning and with visual learning together. The students are able to put all three receptive learning styles together, and they can kind of combine them or leverage them in a way that helps support learning and helps support learning pretty quickly. Whatever their primary receptive learning style is, Sonocent has it for them, and then the other two can jump in and support that primary category. So that works really well as a possible learning tool for individuals who are body learners. So I put this pilot in place. Said let's try it in the fall. We have a much larger percentage of students on academic probation in the spring, but in the fall, I thought it's available. It's something free to try just to see if it might work. And at the time, I had 15 students combined in those probation classes. So 15 students seems kind of manageable. It was a kind of a smaller group to experiment with, and easier maybe to keep tabs as I was, as a manager, trying to see how this might work for those individuals. So 15 students, all on probation, and all significantly at risk. Of that group, 12 of the 15 were either athletes or musicians, primarily all athletes, just a couple of musicians among the group. And if you're good at math, that comes out to about 80%. So kind of right there in with our normal student body ratio of 70% or so of athletes with some additional musicians. Well, 80% of this group fell into that category. Of those individuals, 12 of the 15 students actually used it. They all had the opportunity, they all started, but only 12 of the 15 actually used it. The results of the trial, 11 of the students increased grade point average. One decreased grade point average. So I've looked at that one student. The best I have been able to tell for that student is that student didn't actually attend class very often. Based on, we have some retention alerts and things that we use. I think most schools do, so some of you may be familiar with this. But when I go back and look at those, I can see teachers saying he's not attending. He was an athlete, so coaches following up, trying to see why the kid's not going to class. So he used it enough that I can see that he used it and can tell that he did, but at the same time, grade point average did not increase. So that leaves me with 11 with grade point average increases by using Sonocent that semester, in hopes of helping them learn how they learn, and then by virtue of doing that and doing it in an organized manner and using the 3 different receptive learning styles congruently, hopefully to increase grade point average enough to be allowed to stay at the institution and to proceed forward then pretty quickly with a successful grade point average that removes them from probation and takes them out of that category of being at risk. Overall, using those 11 students, the smallest increase in grade point average was by about 1/3 of a grade. The highest increase was a full grade point difference, and that's on a 4-point scale for anybody who's listening who might be using a different grading scale. The average was a 1/2 to 3/4 grade point. So to me, that's telling. I've got some students that in using the program were able to be more successful. And when I compare these to previous numbers of students on probation, looking at who is retained, who moves forward successfully, and how long it takes students to improve their situation, these are some very positive numbers. They compare very positively when compared with sort of our previous attempts at serving students on probation. For us, I mentioned we're a private school. I've named our price tag. If we are able to save 11 students per semester, even for just one semester, and hopefully it would be much longer. The goal is that students move forward successfully. But if we were able to just keep them one additional semester, that's easily somewhere between $65,000 and $80,000 revenue for the institution to help us continue to provide programs to support the institution in that way. It's from a financial perspective, when we start looking at what students stay, what students don't stay, how successful they are when they do stay after they have been struggling students, we don't always have the best retention numbers, and we're looking for ways to improve that. And to me, this first pilot, this small pilot that we ran, indicates there's something very positive about using the Sonocent program and what students get in terms of the results for what they get. That's kind of the numbers. We had some really good, I spent some time doing some back-end assessment anecdotally with students as well, asking them what they thought of the program. What do they like? What do they not like? What worked for them? Some of the students fell into that category of, I like taking my computer to class and typing. It helped me pay attention better. And there was something, based on what they said, something related to how they focused differently in class. Having a computer and typing and approaching it that way somehow helped them pay attention in the way they needed to learn more effectively. I had a number of students who participated that cited organizational structure. You'll see when Amer kind of shows you the program after my piece of the webinar, how the program helps students organize material. And some students took a lot of notes on it. Some students took very few notes. But when combining the auditory piece, having an opportunity to upload the teacher's slides and having that match the auditory piece and so on, that organizational structure piece seemed to really help a lot of our students. And then others had other things to say. You're going to see that the program is visually attractive. Students are able to color code the actual recording in addition to color coding their notes as they type along. And some of those things, especially for visual learners where they need some of the colors and the sort of the visual identifiers that help attract them in some way and help them pay attention in some way. Those were the kinds of anecdotal comments that I got, that it provided some of that, and each student had a little bit of a different slant on why they felt it worked for them, but all pretty much agreed that it worked very well for them. So somewhere down the road, what are our ultimate next steps? My ultimate next step, I think, is I am working on funding, and I'm going to try it as a year program and follow students through our first level probation on into our second level probation, and kind of see maybe how it works as a two-step support. And then I don't know. Who knows beyond that? Amer, I actually forgot to have you move to the third slide, but I pretty much have just covered most of what's there. I think at this point, Amer, I'll turn it over to you and let you show the program a little bit, and then I'll be available to answer questions about our pilot and kind of how we're using it at the end.
Not to worry, Amy. I was wondering about that third slide, so it's all right.
Sorry about that.
Not to worry. That was very good. Thank you for that. And like Amy said, we will take some questions towards the end, and hopefully we should have sufficient time to go cover that too. So what I thought would be useful is actually focus on, just before showing you the software, looking at the problem. So why do we all take notes? And what we're trying to do is capture information that's given to us in a lecture environment or any sort of environment where someone's delivering that information to us. And we're trying to keep up with it. The reason why we're doing it, we want to summarize it later on so we can recall it. And it helps us remember it. So it sounds difficult because it is. We're trying to do too many things at the same time. we're trying to not only synthesize the information, we're sequencing it, and then at the same time, we're trying to keep up with the pace of that lecturer or whoever's delivering that piece of information to us. By the end of it, if your writing's not gone completely kaput, you would be left with information that's missing up to 70% of the key information. And that's actually a study that was done that typically students would capture only 11 to 70% of the information that's presented in a lecture. Now, what we wanted to do is remove first the stress and anxiety element from note-taking, but also to break it up into a variety of different steps. And this is where, as Amy touched on, was the software really comes into light, is it allows you to break that note-taking process up into manageable steps. So you're working at your own pace, your own time. So what I'm going to do is now actually show you the software. So bear with me a second. There it is. So what you're seeing there, and this is a software that works on both platforms, so for Macs and PCs. It does have a companion app that it comes with. That's a free app, and that works on Android and iOS devices. Now, I'm on a PC right now, so what you're saying, the version for the Mac looks identical. You shouldn't see any differences on that too. So this is the home screen. So as soon as I open up the software, this is what I get to see. Now, right off the bat, what a student would do is if they're going into class, they would click the top one, which is blank project. The ones below are more for online content, so I will not cover that today, but normally when we do set up a training session for you guys, if you're piloting or you're getting set up, we will cover some of these training in the training aspects actually. So I'm actually going to go to the blank project, which is saying that I'm recording using the built-in microphone of my device. Okay, so click on that. And this is the page that opens up. So now the first thing the student would do is press record. And as I begin speaking, or the lecturer begins speaking, their voice is represented by these audio bars. Now, you'll notice that every time there's a pause in my voice, that's where you see the space between the bars happening. So think of those bars as spoken phrases. Now, everything's being captured for the student, so they don't have to worry about scribbling anything down or typing everything down and trying to keep up. It's capturing everything for them. But we want to take it a step further. We want to actually really focus on active listening, so the students do not zone out. And the way we did this was, if you look onto the right-hand side, you'll see these color highlights. Now, these are default. I can change them if I want. I can change the colors or the wording, but the first one in this case, for example, I've got the color red, which says that this is important, and has a keyboard shortcut key of number 1, so I can either press 1 on the keyboard or click on it. Now let's assume at some point in the lecture the professor says, this part's really important, it's going to be on the exam. I'm going to just click on important, and now I know that that part, the audio bars, are on that red color now. So it's almost like using that highlighter pen in a textbook, but I'm doing it in real time with actual audio. And the moment it's not important anymore, press 1 again, and it'll go back to the default color. Likewise, if there's a homework assignment that was given, I can press the third one, which is task, press 3 on the keyboard, and I'm color highlighting that way. It keeps me attentive in class. It allows for that active listening and really engaged with the material that's being presented to me. So the other thing you're able to do on this is, if you look at the top main bar, you'll see this tab that says import. I can actually import in PowerPoint slides or even accessible PDFs. So I'm just going to import some slides here, some example ones. And there they are. They're in the images pane there. Now, at this point, you'll notice there's a middle pane there called the text pane. If I wanted to, I can use this to type, say, certain keywords. Our recommendation is try not to type your full note summaries in the text. If you want, certain keywords is fine, But what you really want to do is really go for the active listening and fully engage, and just focus on the annotating. Now, the reason for importing the slides beforehand is, now let's assume at some point in the lecture, the professor's now moved on to the next slide. All I do is press enter on the keyboard, and my audio is automatically aligned to that appropriate slide. I can still color highlight if I want. And if the whole section's important, you'll notice on the right-hand side, I can actually highlight the whole section. So let's say this whole section was important. I can press 9 on the keyboard, and that whole section turns important. And onwards and onwards. Okay? Now this is what the student does in class. All they're doing is pressing enter to move to the next sections and color highlighting. A lot less stress, a lot less anxiety. Everything's been captured for them. Now assume the lecture's finishing. All the student does is press stop. Right above it, there's a drop-down arrow, and you can save this on your local drive, Dropbox, Google Drive, wherever you want to save it. When I come back to listen to this again, I open up the file. All I do is click at the start, press play. I'm hoping you should hear this. If not, and as I begin speaking, or the lecturer begins speaking, their voice is represented. So that should play the audio back, right? Now, let's say I listen to some parts. I'm just going to highlight some of these bars here. And I realized this part was actually important. I forgot to color highlight in class. You can always do it after the fact. And actually, I can move audio chunks to different areas. So let's say this belongs with the next slide. I can just move that, click, drag, and drop. So it's very editable, very customizable for yourself. Now, the other thing is, I may not want to listen to the entire 2-hour lecture. Let's, if the students perhaps is happy with their color highlights there, and they just want to listen to the parts that they highlighted as important, they can just say, go to extract, extract audio, and I'll take those two highlight colors, press OK. There it is. The original file is always there, so rest assured that doesn't get deleted. It just opens up another folder for you with the extracted audio. So now instead of 2 hours worth of audio, I'm listening to 15 minutes worth. And this is where we really recommend you type your full note summaries for each section. And you can kind of see the scaffolding or the layering process the student's going through. They're going through it at their own pace, listening to it. Now, while listening back, if I realize, wait a second, the professor's speaking too fast, I'm barely understanding this, or perhaps they have a strong accent, I can slow down or increase the tempo to suit whatever pace is comfortable for me. So I can slow down that tempo, play it back, and type my notes here. So we've added a few audio features onto this to allow you to listen to this at your own pace and actually your own comfort level. So you can make the voice brighter, you can make it deeper, more higher pitched if you need to. So there are a few audio functions that you do have on this. I can print all of this off. I can print off my entire note summaries. There's another section here called the reference section I've just opened up. I can actually extract all the text out from the PowerPoint slides or the accessible PDFs. So now it's, one, more legible. I can read it easily, but it's formatable text. So I can have it displayed in any font I want. Or, because we're dealing with audio, I can have it spoken back to me. This has a built-in text-to-speech. So right there where it says speak, I can press that.
The ethics of tea. Economics.
And have the word spoken back to me. And like I said before, the other thing is I can create my own study resource. So I can print this off, save it as a Word document or a PDF, but at least I've created my, my document to work with. The audio can be exported into iTunes, so you can listen back to it at your own pace. And each section can be a track, for example. Okay. Now, this is a very, very basic version of the demonstration of how Sonocent works. There's a lot of features on this. It does quite a lot more even. But that first semester when a student is using this, I'd really focus in on get them to record, color highlight, and at the end, when they're done with this, typing their note summaries. As they increase their proficiency, they will develop and understand the other features better too. It can do presentation capture. It can allow you to prepare for presentations. It can allow you to work with the composition, so for essay writing. We do run these student training modules every semester, Sonocent 101 and 201s, which focus on a little bit more in-depth training for students too. So hopefully that gave you a glimpse into Sonocent and how it works. I wanted to give enough time in for us to actually answer questions because I'm just mindful of that. So I am just going to open up Amy's microphone. So if you do have any questions, please do type away and we will try to answer them as and when. Amy, I've just unmuted you. So
Yes, sir. I'm here.
Excellent, excellent. Now, one thing I wanted to say, I know you've all heard Amy talk about the Sonocent pilot. So we did start the pilot program off. This was I believe it was last fall when we started the pilot program. And since then, as I mentioned, we've had over 300 universities that, such as Amy's, that actually implemented this. We're continuing again. So we're continuing it this fall too. And I believe we put a deadline in till mid-September. So if you do want to qualify for the pilot, just get in touch. Put some contact details there, and we'll get you qualified for a pilot. What we essentially do is we give you 25 licenses for you to use with your students. Go through your due diligence as Amy and her team did, and figure out exactly what results you're looking for. At the end of which, it should allow you to say, okay, you know what, this works for all our students, it works for some of them, but at least you're able to get that data on your own. We will provide you support in terms of training or any other support you need. You will get a dedicated account manager. I think, Amy, who was it you worked with? Was it Craig?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep, Craig is my guy. And I'll put a plug. Craig's my guy. I'll put a plug in that Sonocent staff are incredibly helpful. My account manager is very responsive. If I call her, I send emails. Usually hear back very quickly. But we've also had occasion to use the helpline and had tech support people respond very quickly. The training for me and the training for my students is excellent. Just for them to know what they're doing, and then, you know, as students will, they get enough basic knowledge and then, you know, go off figuring out how to make it work best for themselves. But that base training is there. You also, Amira didn't mention, but Sonocent will also provide some advertising materials to put around for students to see, and then sometimes they come and ask about the program on their own as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know we did that. Where it really did start from was in California, where a lot of the community colleges started using this too. And
Yes.
there was a program we ran for the Veterans Department there, where they, and actually we're still ongoing. It's going to run next year too. And what they suggested was, like, you know, if we put some posters up in the campuses, it'll attract the students. So, because student adoption is one of those things that they really look for. So
Right.
it worked really well. So that was the basis for us creating a lot of the materials that I know Amy utilized. So no, really thanks for that. And I hope everyone found the information we provided here useful. And once again, with regards to the pilot, get in touch with us. If you have any questions on how Amy's pilot went, I'm just trying to find your contact details. I'm wondering whether it was on the original, the first slide. Let's see if we did put it there. No, it isn't. Anna, would you mind actually typing out Amy's email address? Amy, if you're okay with that, and then if people
Sure,
need to get in touch.
that's fine. Happy to answer questions about how some of this has worked practically within our context. Absolutely.
Yeah. So
And
I'll open it up for maybe a minute more for questions, and if anyone doesn't have any, then we'll close the webinar at that point. So we're within the time, which is very good.
Hannah, do you need my email address? Oh, you got it. Thank you, ma'am.
Excellent. Well, once again, thank you everyone for taking time today to join us on this webinar, and we look forward to hearing from you. Amy, once again, thanks a lot, and hopefully you'll see you stateside at some point. I am planning to coming over to Philadelphia next year for a conference there, so hopefully I'll see you some point soon. Okay.
All right. Thank you, Mayor.
Perfect. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.